Dust swirled around Sheriff Amos Granger's worn boots as he surveyed the bustling town of Redemption Gulch. The sun beat down on the wooden buildings, baking the dirt streets to a crisp. Amos, a man carved from granite and grit, stood tall, his gaze sharp and unwavering. He was Redemption Gulch's shield, its protector against the harsh realities of the Wild West. Folks knew Amos. They knew his handshake was his word, and his word was law. He wasn't just a sheriff. He was a neighbor, a friend, a pillar of the community. He'd helped Mrs. Henderson retrieve her runaway cow, mediated disputes between feuding ranchers, and even rescued a litter of kittens from a flooded mine shaft. Amos believed in fairness, in justice for all, and in protecting the innocent. His days were filled with the usual small-town troubles, drunken brawls, petty thievery, and the occasional wandering desperado. But Amos handled them all with a steady hand and a calm demeanor. He wasn't a man who sought violence, but he wouldn't back down from it either. Redemption Gulch wasn't a paradise, but it was home. It was a place where people looked out for each other, where hard work was rewarded, and where a man's character mattered more than his wealth. Amos was proud to wear the badge, proud to serve the people of Redemption Gulch. He'd sworn an oath, and he intended to keep it, no matter the cost. The townsfolk slept soundly knowing Amos was on watch, a silent guardian against the darkness that lurked beyond the flickering lamplight. He was their peace of mind, their guarantee of safety in a world where danger was always just around the corner. The tranquility of Redemption Gulch was about to be shattered. A cloud of dust, thicker and darker than any dust devil, heralded the arrival of men who cared nothing for fairness or the well-being of others. They came in fancy carriages and rode expensive horses, their faces etched with greed and arrogance. These were the land barons, men who saw Redemption Gulch not as a community, but as a prize to be seized. Their leader, a man named Bartholomew Blackwood, was particularly unsettling. He was tall and thin, with a cruel smile that never reached his cold, calculating eyes. He spoke with a honeyed voice, but Amos could hear the steel beneath the surface. Blackwood claimed he wanted to invest in Redemption Gulch, to bring progress and prosperity. But Amos saw through the charade. He knew Blackwood's progress meant lining his own pockets, his prosperity built on the backs of the townspeople. Blackwood and his cronies began buying up land, offering prices that seemed generous at first. But soon, they started using more forceful tactics, intimidating farmers and ranchers into selling their property for next to nothing. They controlled the bank, the general store, and even the saloon, slowly tightening their grip on the town. Whispers of threats and violence began to circulate, and fear started to creep into the hearts of the townsfolk. Amos watched with growing concern. He knew he had to do something, but he wasn't sure what. Blackwood and his men were powerful and well-connected. They had money, influence, and a willingness to use both to get what they wanted. Amos was just one man, but he had something they didn't: the unwavering support of the people he had sworn to protect. The stage was set for a battle between right and wrong, between the powerful and the powerless, between Sheriff Amos Granger and the ruthless land barons. Blackwood's first direct approach was subtle. He invited Amos to a friendly meeting at the saloon, offering him a hefty sum of money to look the other way when it came to certain business dealings. He painted a picture of a prosperous future for Redemption Gulch, a future where everyone benefited from Blackwood's investments. All Amos had to do was cooperate. Amos listened patiently, his expression unreadable. He took a long sip of his whiskey, the silence hanging heavy in the air. When Blackwood finished, Amos set down his glass with a deliberate clink. "Mr. Blackwood," he said, his voice low and steady, "I appreciate the offer, but I can't accept." Blackwood's smile faltered. "Are you sure, Sheriff? This is a generous opportunity." "I'm sure," Amos replied. "My duty is to the people of Redemption Gulch, and I won't betray their trust for any amount of money. Your business dealings are hurting this town, and I won't stand by and let it happen." Blackwood's eyes narrowed. "You're making a mistake, Sheriff. A grave mistake." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "There are consequences for defying me. Amos met his gaze unflinchingly. "I'm not afraid of you, Mr. Blackwood. I swore an oath to uphold the law, and that's exactly what I intend to do." The meeting ended with a chilling silence. Blackwood left the saloon, his face a mask of barely concealed rage. Amos knew he had made an enemy, a powerful and dangerous enemy, but he also knew he had done the right thing. He couldn't compromise his principles, not even to protect himself. He was the sheriff of Redemption Gulch, and he would defend his town to the very end. The lines had been drawn, and the battle for Redemption Gulch was about to begin in earnest. The ambush was swift and brutal. Amos was riding back from a neighboring town, where he'd been investigating reports of cattle rustling, he suspected, orchestrated by Blackwood himself. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. He was alone, an easy target. A volley of gunfire erupted from the rocks lining the narrow canyon road. Amos reacted instantly, diving from his horse as bullets whizzed past. He landed hard, the wind knocked out of him, but he scrambled for cover behind a large boulder. He drew his revolver, returning fire, but he was outnumbered. Blackwood's men, masked and ruthless, swarmed down the canyon walls, closing in on him. Amos fought bravely, taking down 2 of his attackers, but he knew it was a losing battle. He was wounded, his gun was almost empty, and the odds were stacked against him. Finally, they overwhelmed him. They beat him mercilessly, their faces contorted with hatred. They left him for dead, his body battered and broken, his spirit crushed. They dragged him to the edge of the canyon, a sheer drop into the darkness below. With a final, cruel shove, they sent him tumbling into the abyss, confident that they had silenced Sheriff Amos Granger forever. They rode away, leaving him to the vultures and the coyotes, believing they had rid themselves of their biggest obstacle. The canyon echoed with the sound of their horses' hooves, a mocking farewell to the fallen lawman. Blackwood had won, or so he thought, but he underestimated the resilience of Amos Granger and the burning desire for revenge that would soon rise from the depths of that canyon. Amos didn't die. Not that day. He landed on a narrow ledge, the fall broken just enough to keep him clinging to life. Pain ripped through his body, a symphony of agony that echoed the vastness of the canyon. His legs were broken, his ribs cracked, and his head throbbed with a blinding intensity. He lay there for what seemed like an eternity, the sun beating down on him during the day, the cold seeping into his bones at night. He was alone, abandoned, left to rot. But something within him refused to give up. A spark of defiance, fueled by the memory of the town he had sworn to protect, flickered in his battered soul. He thought of the faces of the people of Redemption Gulch, their trust, their hopes, their dreams. He thought of Blackwood's cruel smile, his arrogance, his contempt for justice. Slowly, painstakingly, he began to crawl. Inch by agonizing inch, he dragged himself along the ledge, driven by a single, unwavering purpose: survival. He found a small spring, its water barely a trickle, but enough to keep him alive. He ate insects and scavenged for anything he could find to nourish his broken body. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. His wounds festered, his body withered, but his spirit grew stronger. He learned to endure the pain, to ignore the hunger, to focus solely on his goal. The canyon became his prison, his training ground, his crucible. He was no longer the same man who had fallen into that abyss. He was harder, tougher, more determined than ever before. He was a survivor, forged in the fires of suffering, and he was coming back for vengeance. Years passed, years of relentless training, of pushing his broken body to its absolute limits. Amos, or rather, what remained of him, emerged from the canyon a ghost of his former self. His face was scarred, his body lean and wiry, his eyes burning with an icy fire. He had fashioned a mask from tanned leather, concealing his identity, erasing the last vestiges of Amos Granger. He studied Blackwood and his operations. He learned their routines, their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities. He discovered how they had tightened their grip on Redemption Gulch, squeezing the life out of the town. The bank foreclosed on family farms. The saloon became a den of vice, and the general store charged exorbitant prices. Blackwood's men ruled with an iron fist, silencing any dissent with threats and violence. Amos honed his skills. He became a master marksman, his aim as true as ever. He learned to move silently, to blend into the shadows, to become a phantom. He practiced hand-to-hand combat, turning his years of experience into a deadly art. He acquired a black stallion, a creature as dark and powerful as his own resolve. He was no longer a sheriff, bound by the constraints of the law. He was something else, something darker, something more dangerous. He was the ghost sheriff, an avenging angel, a force of nature unleashed upon those who had wronged him and the town he had sworn to protect. The time for justice was at hand, and Blackwood and his men were about to pay the price for their sins. The whispers started, a masked rider, a shadow in the night, a bringer of reckoning. Redemption Gulch would soon learn that Amos Granger was not truly dead. He had simply been reborn. The first strike was against the bank, not with guns blazing, but with quiet precision. The ghost sheriff slipped in under the cover of darkness, disabling the guards and leaving a message etched in a Blackwood's personal vault. The reckoning has begun. No money was taken, only fear sown. Next, the saloon. The ghost sheriff didn't kill anyone, but he exposed the cheating card games, the watered-down whiskey, and the exploitation of the women who worked there. He left the patrons shaken and the saloon owner terrified. Again, a message: justice is coming. Then, the general store. The ghost sheriff didn't steal supplies, but he adjusted the prices, marking them down to fair and affordable levels. He left a note for the owner: greed will be punished. Each act was carefully calculated, designed to disrupt Blackwood's operations and inspire hope in the townspeople. The ghost sheriff was a symbol, a whisper in the wind, a promise of liberation. People started to believe that maybe, just maybe, Redemption Gulch could be saved. Blackwood was furious, but also unnerved. He couldn't understand who this masked rider was or what he wanted. He doubled his security, hired more gunslingers, and spread fear throughout the town. But the ghost sheriff was always one step ahead, a phantom in the night, a force that couldn't be contained. The legend grew with each passing day. Some said he was an angel of vengeance, others a spirit of the West. But everyone agreed on one thing: the ghost sheriff was Redemption Gulch's only hope. And he was just getting started. As the ghost sheriff's legend grew, so did the courage of the townspeople. They started to resist Blackwood's oppression in small ways at first, refusing to pay exorbitant prices, organizing secret meetings, sharing information about Blackwood's movements. The ghost sheriff had ignited a spark of defiance, and it was spreading like wildfire. Blackwood, desperate to regain control, offered a hefty reward for the ghost sheriff's capture, dead or alive. He brought in more gunslingers, turning Redemption Gulch into an armed camp. Fear gripped the town once more, but this time it was mixed with a simmering anger. The ghost sheriff knew he had to escalate his actions. He began targeting Blackwood's henchmen directly, ambushing them on lonely roads, disrupting their illegal activities, and leaving them with a clear message: leave Redemption Gulch or face the consequences. One by one, Blackwood's men started to disappear. Some were found tied up and abandoned in the desert. Others simply vanished without a trace. The remaining henchmen grew increasingly paranoid, turning on each other, suspecting betrayal at every turn. Blackwood's organization was crumbling from within. The townspeople watched with a mixture of fear and elation. They knew the ghost sheriff was risking his life for them, and they were grateful. They started to leave food and supplies for him, tokens of their appreciation and support. The ghost sheriff had become more than just a legend. He was their protector, their savior, their symbol of hope in a dark and desperate time. The final confrontation was inevitable. The ghost sheriff and Bartholomew Blackwood were on a collision course, and Redemption Gulch held its breath, waiting to see who would emerge victorious. Blackwood, cornered and enraged, decided to take drastic action. He seized control of the town square, declaring martial law. He rounded up the townspeople, threatening them with violence if they didn't reveal the ghost sheriff's identity. Fear hung heavy in the air, but so did a palpable sense of defiance. As Blackwood ranted and raved, a figure emerged from the shadows. The ghost sheriff, cloaked in black, his mask gleaming in the fading light, rode into the square on his black stallion. A gasp rippled through the crowd. All eyes were on him. "Let them go, Blackwood," the ghost sheriff said, his voice a low growl that resonated with authority. Blackwood sneered. "So, you finally show your face, coward. I've been waiting for you." He gestured to his men, who surrounded the ghost sheriff, their guns drawn. "Kill him." A fierce gunfight erupted. The ghost sheriff moved with lightning speed, dodging bullets and taking down Blackwood's men with deadly accuracy. The townspeople, emboldened by his presence, began to fight back, throwing rocks and bottles, creating a distraction. The square became a chaotic battleground, a clash between tyranny and freedom. The ghost sheriff fought his way through the chaos, his focus solely on Blackwood. He knew this was the moment of truth, the final showdown. He had to defeat Blackwood, not just for himself, but for the soul of Redemption Gulch. The air crackled with tension, the fate of the town hanging in the balance. It was a fight he knew he had to win. The ghost sheriff and Blackwood faced each other, the only two figures standing amidst the chaos. Blackwood, his face contorted with rage and fear, pulled out his own gun, a gold-plated revolver that gleamed in the dim light. "You think you can stop me?" Blackwood snarled. "I control this town. I control everything." "You control nothing," the ghost sheriff replied, his voice unwavering. "You only take. You only exploit. You only destroy." "I offered you a chance, Granger." Blackwood spat, revealing that he knew the ghost sheriff's true identity. "You could have had it all." "I already had it all," the ghost sheriff said, his voice filled with sorrow. "I had the trust of these people. I had my honor. You took that away from me." Blackwood fired, but the ghost sheriff dodged the bullet with ease. He returned fire, his shot hitting Blackwood in the arm. Blackwood cried out in pain, dropping his gun. The ghost sheriff approached Blackwood slowly, his eyes filled with a cold, righteous fury. He reached down and grabbed Blackwood by the collar, lifting him to his feet. "This ends here, Blackwood," the ghost sheriff said. "Your reign of terror is over." He dragged Blackwood to the edge of the town square, to the very spot where Blackwood had first arrived in Redemption Gulch. He looked at the crowd, their faces filled with hope and anticipation. Then, he looked back at Blackwood, his eyes filled with scorn. With a final shove, he sent Blackwood tumbling into the dirt, his reign of terror finally at an end. The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices echoing through the night. Redemption Gulch was free. With Blackwood defeated, his remaining henchmen scattered and fled, leaving Redemption Gulch to rebuild. The townspeople worked together to restore their homes, their businesses, and their sense of community. The bank was reformed, the saloon cleaned up, and the general store once again offered fair prices. But what a ghost sheriff! He stood silently in the town square, watching as the people celebrated their victory. He knew his work was done. He had avenged his betrayal, liberated Redemption Gulch, and restored justice to the land. As the sun began to rise, casting a golden glow over the town, the ghost sheriff turned to leave. He mounted his black stallion and rode out of Redemption Gulch, disappearing into the vast expanse of the west. Some say he rode on to other towns, bringing justice to those who were oppressed. Others say he simply faded away, becoming a legend, a whisper in the wind. But everyone in Redemption Gulch knew the truth. Sheriff Amos Granger, the ghost sheriff, had saved them all. Redemption Gulch never forgot the ghost sheriff. His story was passed down from generation to generation, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope can prevail and one person can make a difference. The town prospered, built on the values of fairness, justice, and community that Amos Granger had always stood for. And though the ghost sheriff was never seen again, his spirit lived on in the hearts of the people of Redemption Gulch, a symbol of courage, resilience, and the enduring power of justice. The legend of the ghost sheriff became a timeless tale, forever etched in the history of the Wild West.